Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Filmstudy. This is Ken McKusick. We have a special short for you today. A Reddit user who I've been in conversations with and had been very interested in a lot of his posts and whatnot, wanted to give a general 2026 Ravens offseason plan. Want to welcome in Ashwin Reddy, who's joining us for the first time on the show. Ashwin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ken. Glad to be here and real excited to talk some football today.
All right. Outstanding. So let's just jump right into it because, obviously tumultuous offseason in terms of coaching and staff in general, but it's also a huge postseason in terms of a lot of free agents for the Ravens.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I wrote the original Reddit post kind of 2 weeks before the end of the season. And I mean, obviously so much has changed between then. Most importantly, we have a new head coach now, and that's huge.
Yeah, big change with Minter, more changes coming, and Harbaugh reportedly has asked to talk to about 24 people from the organization. That he'll probably get a fair number of them to move with him to the Giants. So the organization is going to have some hiring to do after this happens.
Oh, I believe it 100%. And, with every single time with a fresh coach, I mean, they're going to want to bring in their own crew. I'm sure John over in New York, or I guess East Rutherford, is going to want to bring in some of the folks he's worked with over the last 15 to 20 years or so. But it should be an exciting time. It's been such a long time since we've had a new transition, but I'm excited to see what the future holds.
Yeah. All right. Well, I know you have some underlying assumptions for this. Let's start with that before we get into the plan itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first assumption is to start with probably the centerpiece of the team, our friend Lamar Jackson. I think he's coming up to a point where he's has a $75-ish million cap hit going into 2026. The first big assumption with all this is that we extend him. I think when I initially wrote this post, I was thinking about $60 million a year matching the Dak Prescott contract. I mean, obviously, I think I'd take Lamar over Dak Prescott any day of the week, and I'm sure any Ravens fan would agree. But I think for really our offseason plans to be kicked off, his $75 million cap hit has to be more manageable. Knock that down by 10, 15 million or so at least.
I think it'll be probably more than that. They'll be looking to extend him probably, I would think, for another 3 or 4 years to tack on to what he's got left on this contract. So I expect that to be a significant commitment. The important thing about the extension to me isn't as much the dollars, although that's important. I don't want to, this is like the Marshall Plan. The dollars were important, but more important is the security guarantee after World War II. The security guarantee is what's really important about getting Lamar Jackson signed this year. It's the fact that the Ravens will know who their quarterback is for the foreseeable future, and they'll be able to make other moves related to that. And I think that's something the Ravens need to use with Lamar and say, look, we're happy to go out and get some of the players you want on offense. And Tyler Linderbaum might be a centerpiece of that, for example, or Isaiah Likely might be. But if we do so, we have to know you're going to be here. And we also have to free up the dollars via this. And so we want you to play ball with us on an extension and commit to the Ravens long term.
Yeah, and that's my hope too. I know a couple years ago, especially after his rookie deal, I know there's a lot of contention regarding, guaranteed money, how long the extension would be. There's that whole snafu with the franchise tag, but I'm hoping we're a couple years in, we're a little more established. I think the offense is really going to revolve around him and revolve around what we can do to put the pieces around him. Like you mentioned, Tyler Linderbaum, and we'll get to it later in the show, is going to be such a big piece moving forward. So, I'm hoping this is going to be a little less drama than the last time we did this, but I think that's going to be the catalyst that kicks off the rest of the offseason moves.
All right, Nnamdi Madubuike, your assumption here is that he's retired.
Yeah. So I'll kind of preface this by saying I do have a little bit of a medical background. So I won't get into any specifics, obviously, but, my thought process is that, he has some sort of neck injury that potentially is compromising the spinal cord. Obviously, I'm not in the know here. Anything is between Nnamdi Madubuike and his treatment team. But, my best guess is there's probably some level of uncertainty regarding can he play, can he not play? I'm sure he's getting multiple opinions where maybe one group of people are saying he should play. The second group of people may be saying, hey, maybe that's not a good long-term solution for you. My assumption long-term is that I think kind of given the communication or potential lack thereof between him and the team, and then the overall murkiness between the coaching staff, the front office, and his status for the rest of the season and going forward, my assumption is he retires.
Yeah. The media, the one thing that I look for in terms of signals is how the coach talks about the player's future. And normally, they're very aggressive about talking. Harbaugh in particular was about talking about how quickly he thought a player could be back. Mm-hmm. And with the Madubuike situation, when he's been at the podium, he's often looked over to Chad Steele or talked to him and said, "I'm not allowed to say this for HIPAA purposes." And Chad will just go, shake his head like this. He's obviously looking for that reinforcement to let the media know that it's not his choice to not say this. And the other thing he's done, which is a key indicator for me, is he's used the language, "I'm going to let him tell you about that." Now, when the last time he used that was when Steve Smith was retiring, and he wants to let players go to the podium and announce their own retirement rather than announce it for them. I don't know. I don't remember exactly what they did with Zach Orr when he had his neck injury, but it was a degenerative neck problem as well. I'm sorry, maybe degenerative isn't right the right word. He might have been born with a problem that he was very lucky never came due in the NFL.
Yeah, I think if I remember it correctly, and this was years ago, so my memory's a little hazy, but I think it was a spinal stenosis. So yeah, like you mentioned, some sort of some sort of congenital condition where he, had a more narrow spinal canal than the average person, which, playing professional football can get a little tenuous at that point. But, I think I agree wholeheartedly with you. I had my criticisms of John Harbaugh, especially near the end of his tenure. But the one thing we can consistently say during his entire tenure is that he let the players speak for themselves, and he was somebody that the players really looked up to and respected. So, I think his comments on letting Madubuike speak for himself regarding his future and his career, like you mentioned, point me towards this being a life-changing and career-changing type of diagnosis for him.
Right. That certainly is the fear, and that's where we're starting from here. Another thing, there were posts, and one of them was on Reddit from somebody who claimed to be a girlfriend of a player and this and that, and said Madubuike had already moved back to Texas and was, the fact that he would be doing any form of rehabilitation down there is also kind of an indicator. It's not unheard of that a player will go to a doctor he's comfortable with or to a real specialist in another city, but it's less usual than trying to get treatment from the team doctor here that you might get. So if Leanne Curl was qualified to treat whatever Madubuike has, then I'm sure that she would be the doctor of preference.
Yeah, and I'd assume so too. And I think I remember correctly a few years ago, Lamar was rehabbing his knee over in South Florida, which made a lot of sense. That was home for him. But I think for a situation like this, where especially given the uncertainty around the injury, him rehabbing in Texas does, raise an eyebrow or two.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's talk this. Those are your underlying assumptions here. So obviously a huge cap loss in terms of Madubuike, setting aside the personal tragedy it is, and then a big cap gain offset, at least in terms of the short term for Lamar. Now, all those dollars will come due. A lot of that money, has already been spent and can't be deferred further. But the portion that they can roll into future years and get some cap relief. So let's talk about what you're going to spend that money on the offense and defense. So you'll start with the offense.
Yeah, let's start with the offense. I guess if it's okay with you, Ken, we can just maybe go position by position and see how things unfold.
Sure.
All right, let's do it. So starting with quarterback, I know we already touched on Lamar, and again, the underlying assumption here is that Lamar is going to get extended. I think the quarterback situation is going to be outside that pretty straightforward. I mean, the big one is Cooper Rush, I think, will end up being released. It'll save maybe about $2 million if we cut him post June 1st. And, for a guy who played a game and a half and got benched, I'm not really sure there's any utility in keeping him around the roster.
I'm with you entirely on the cut. I just did a pod on this recently, so I just have to mention you don't need to manage the cap for the Ravens in terms of moving money into future years. Maybe in this exercise, it's more pertinent. I really like to keep salary discussions on the savings for 26 basis only. The reason is I don't want people treating the cap as a 1-year problem, but I also don't want them talking on 2 or 3 different accounting bases. And so having the single accounting basis is good. This is the most extreme accounting basis. Is it we'll just have him be a post June 1 guy, and then it saves this, and then people think that's the number for 1 year savings. And there's too many people out there, frankly, who want to ignore anything beyond 26 in terms of the cap. There is a gain. There's an additional gain, incremental, in terms of the percentage of discounting you have on that money a year deferred, assuming a salary cap increase occurs. But I just want to keep the accounting basis the same. But anyway, for purposes of this, you're saying post June 1 cut, 2.1 million savings in 26.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, Cooper Rush was a heck of a backup with Dallas a couple of years back. He went like 7-2 or something as a starter when Dak was hurt, which is really quite impressive. But at the end of the day, I don't think he fits this offense nearly as well as a guy like Tyler Huntley, which transitioning to him, I would be in favor of keeping him around for at least a year, if not more than that. I mean,
right player, right price. If Huntley has another opportunity that's more of reflects a higher probability of him being used, would you try and match a deal like that, or would you be looking at the draft? Would you be looking for other free agent quarterbacks? What would you be doing?
It's tough. I think I would try to match it. My rationale here is we know Huntley very well. I mean, he went 2-0 as a starter against pretty stiff competition.
Good teams, yeah.
Yeah, the Bears and the Packers are no slouches at all. He's a guy that clearly the team's going to rally around, going to play very hard for. He's a high-effort player. I mean, I think in that Bears game alone, he had 3 or 4 rushes where he was playing like he had nothing to lose. And, I mean, that's the kind of guy I want on my team as a backup quarterback.
Right. No, I agree. And the Packers game was such an outlier in terms of drive success rate. In particular, they went 30 of 33 in terms of getting a first down after a first down or after a first down. They got a first down and touchdown 30 out of 33 times, which is by far the best of the entire season. So, okay, let's move on because we kind of need to go through quickly this. So running back position, what are you doing that's new there?
Yeah, I mean, Derrick Henry is going to be the guy. I mean, I think his numbers speak for themselves. But I think the interesting discussion here kind of comes at what happens underneath him. Keaton Mitchell is going to be a restricted free agent. I'd be in favor of bringing him back. Absolutely. I think he brings a value of speed to this offense that we don't have otherwise. And that second gear of his is really, truly unmatched. I mean, that run he had against Pittsburgh a few weeks ago, I think, showed that second gear. Burst through a hole, went for 50 yards. I think that was really just the Keaton Mitchell experience in a nutshell there. So I would love to keep him around as a 1-2 punch with Derrick Henry.
Mm-hmm. Okay, right. I'm sorry. That was Mitchell. And so the question is, he's an RFA. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, I think again, this kind of comes to the money aspect here. I mean, I think there's about a $2 million difference between the second round tender and then the right of first refusal. I think giving him the second round tender might be slightly steep for RB2, especially when you have a guy like Derrick Henry, who we know thrives the more carries you give him, especially when you get into the winter months, December, January. I'd want to tender him at the right of first refusal. I mean, he's at the end of the day still an RB2. I don't know if any team is going to be poaching him from us. But he's the guy I'd like to keep in our plans for sure.
Okay, so that'd be $3.45 million. By the way, that tender I believe is not guaranteed. So if they can bring him to camp for $3.45 million, presuming he doesn't get an offer sheet from somebody else that the Ravens don't match, then he comes to camp with the Ravens. Or they can still say later that they're reducing his salary if they. And he can say no to that and become a free agent at that point. But they have done that with linemen before. So James Hurst and Ryan Jensen in the same season, RFA season, both had their number reduced from like 2-point-something million at the time, which was the tender amount, to 1.3, 1.4 million, something like that. But they both had it reduced for so the Ravens could save some money on cap. It's kind of a move that players really don't like, and they don't like a non-guaranteed tender. I also don't think it's automatic that Keaton gets that tender. I think the Ravens will try and negotiate a 2-year deal, 2 years, $6 million, something like that. 2 years, maybe 2 years, $7 million, and possibly with some incentives or something. But I think they actually should be a little bit resistant to paying the full amount of that tender on a 1-year basis, given what he's done so far.
I think that's very fair. Maybe something like the Justice Hill deal from a few years back can be a decent blueprint going forward.
Let's talk about Justice Hill.
Yeah, I love Justice Hill. I think the so-called Goodfellas backfield in 2024 was a lot of fun, the Henry Hill backfield. But I think at this point, cutting him would save us a decent amount of money. I think, unfortunately, he was a little expendable last year. And, his value as a pass blocker has been noted and very appreciated. But, Ken, as you've mentioned in your pods before, Rashid Ali filled that role fairly well near the end of the year last year.
He had a really good game. And then he had some not so good play after that. I think the jury is out. I think it's something he really needs to work on. And I'm sure we'll get to him in a second here. But with Hill, I see about $3.15 million in savings for a regular cut this year. So that's a post June 1. No, there's a pre June 1 cut rather. So he's one of 4 players where there's any significant savings on the roster. So I definitely think he's the second most in jeopardy of that group of 4.
Yeah, and I think personally he's a pretty easy cut for me if it does save us $3 million.
Would you cut him and then re-sign him? Would you try and get him to take less? How would you do you really care if he's the 4th running back, or would you draft somebody and get younger?
I think I would honestly feel the latter. I think I would draft someone to get younger. I mean, He was drafted in 18 or 19. He's 20. 19. Yeah, I think he was like 28 or 29 years old. I mean, he's definitely on the older side for an NFL running back. I think we know that NFL running backs, you can find some good gems late round. And as the guys in RB3, RB4, I think we can pick someone up in the draft and, develop them appropriately.
Good career. I hope he goes on and becomes a running backs coach, because I think since he's dedicated doing the various things that running backs have to do well, I think he might be very good at it. So it'd be interesting to see if they decide to have him hang around like an Anthony Levine has, to be an assistant running backs coach or whatever it might be for a year, and then launch a coaching career that way.
I love that. I mean, I think also the fact this guy came off a torn ACL, or not, an Achilles actually, which could be a death sentence for many NFL players, let alone a running back that relies on speed and burst. And I think he came back stronger than ever. And I think that's the kind of guy that I'd love to have coaching young running backs. A guy that knows what it is to put the work in.
Yeah, that's a good point, and knows what it is to rehab too. Is not nothing. So let's move on to the wide receivers.
Yeah, wide receivers. I think the big kind of question I have revolves around Zay. I think we've kind of talked about this before, but his tag number is going to be extremely high, especially given the multiple Pro Bowl nominations at this point. I think he had almost 1,200 yards last year. He had almost 1,200 the year before. He's clearly Lamar's go-to guy at this point.
Mm-hmm.
The chemistry they have on the field is really quite impressive. I speak at some point from a scarred Ravens fan that's been a bit lacking of good receiver play for the longest time, but I think we have to explore potentially extending him early. Try and maybe extend him this offseason, maybe getting him somewhere like the Terry McLaurin deal, the Amon-Ra St. Brown deal potentially. I'm not sure if he's as good as Amon-Ra St. Brown, but I think market rate wouldn't be unreasonable at all for him.
So the Ravens have in recent years had a philosophy of draft the receiver rather than go out and sign them. They had a long period where they signed a bunch of, frankly, loser, older, veteran receivers that didn't do much for the Ravens. And that includes Crabtree. Wallace wasn't terrible in his time here, but a bunch of guys. The only guy that was kind of a older receiver who came to the Ravens, well, 2 that I can think of, 3, Smith, Mason, and Bolden, were really kind of the 3 guys who produced at an older age. And maybe I put at a lower level, I'd put Hopkins in that camp, given what he did in a single season. It's at a lower level though. I mean, the targets are not nearly the same. I think the Ravens may be committed to sticking with what they think is an overpriced position for how they run their team, to keeping moneyballing that position by going ahead and drafting a new guy. I think they will give the 5th-year option to Flowers, could be about $28 million. And then they have him for next year under the current contract anyway. But they might trade him before the 27 season potentially. And they obviously they did it with Marquise Brown. They did that before his 4th year, I think. Right? He played 3 years with the Ravens. Yeah, that was traded prior to the 22 draft. He was drafted in 19. That's right.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable consideration. I mean, this team is definitely, I don't want to say deprioritize the receiver position, but definitely let it take a back seat to tight ends and certainly to the running backs and offensive line. The one kind of concern I have with that is we, for the first time in this entire team's history, have a quarterback that can really go downfield and really command a passing heavy offense if he wants to. These guys I loved Derek Mason's time. Anquan Bolden was obviously paramount to Super Bowl run. Steve Smith had an incredible 2-year tenure with us, but I also do have a bit of a hesitation to get rid of a guy that I think has a great connection to Lamar Jackson and also is someone that can stretch a defense and really stress out a defense both vertically and even horizontally, for that matter, on the jet sweeps and on bubble screens and the like. I remember watching that first Buffalo game this year. I think it was a play in the third quarter where he took a screen, juked out a couple people, went 25 yards to the house. Mm-hmm. I can't remember the last time we had a receiver that could do that on a regular basis.
Well, we need to defer usage for another time and really talk about the topical level only on that. No, we want to stick with the plan here. I'm with you in terms of the quality of the player. My issue is that the Ravens, as a team, have far fewer targets going to receivers. And so I understand the Ravens' desire to limit total expenditure on receivers. And I was trying to find, similar numbers, but Flowers has grown very slowly from 108 to 118 targets in 3 years. And I want to see like some of these receivers who get 120 catches a year are obviously getting close to 200 targets. So he doesn't get the same number of targets within the Ravens offense as all fantasy players probably get upset about.
Right. But yeah, I mean, I think he's going to be an interesting decision going forward.
All right.
But if we do keep him, he's our number one.
Okay. Move on to tight end.
Sure. I think the decision was kind of made for us, at least on the tight end one, where Mark Andrews is sticking around. I think at the end of the day, he's been a great contributor for us and it'll make sense. But the question has always been, can we keep Isaiah Likely around in addition to Mark Andrews? I think that's going to be very tricky with the amount of money he's going to command in the market.
Right. I think so too. And I think they have too many needs at other positions to probably address it. So Likely probably ends up walking. They made their attempt to sign Likely before the season, and he looked great in camp. Oh, reaching back and forward for the ball. Catch radius looked enormous, and then he got hurt. The deal didn't get done. I don't know if the Ravens pulled it or if Likely said no to it. Reportedly, it was around $14 million per year, so it would have been more than what Andrews got. Mm-hmm. That would be appropriate at their current, points along the aging curve. It's sad to see him go. I think Charlie Kolar, then you're keeping.
I'd like to. I think he'd be a much cheaper option. Maybe get like the Noah Gray deal, $6-7 million a year. Mm-hmm. He might be one that I think we could kind of slide on the radar, and he could slot into a tight end 2 position.
All right. Well, we certainly would get a chance to see then if his activity as a receiver picked up. I mean, he was drafted as basically a pure receiving tight end. Right. A guy flexed out at Iowa State a lot, and they ran a lot of the offense through him, but that really hasn't been the way he's been used at all here in Baltimore. And it's been nice that he's been such a good blocker.
Right. And I admire his ability to adapt and do what the team needed over the last couple of years, which is becoming primarily blocking tight end. But, mm-hmm. If Likely's going to walk, I'd love to see what Kolar could do as a receiver. And if he can kind of go back to that Iowa State form with, he had Brock Purdy throwing the ball to him. Mm-hmm. He was a great target back then.
All right. Offensive tackle, kind of a nice position entering the draft for a change this year.
For a change. And I think this is where it gets pretty simple. I mean, I think our tackles are set. Ron Stanley at left, Raza Rosengarten at right. Carson Vinson will, I think, slot in as the left tackle of the future, kind of as a tackle 2 behind Stanley. Joe Noboom, I think, will probably defer on signing and then, hopefully draft somebody in the mid rounds or maybe grab a veteran backup here just to kind of round out the room.
Right. And the guy in the mid rounds is maybe a swing guy who plays guard and tackle. You can't really carry 4 tackles easily. We can't ever carry 4 really on the game day rosters, 4 exclusive tackles. And that's what the Ravens have. I mean, somebody asked me recently about moving Rosengarten to guard, and I'm like, that'd be, be a huge waste. But
Right.
if you have 4 tackles, you have a harder time getting through a football game if you have them all on your roster. And then it becomes a question of is there really even room on the 9-man, because you only get 1 extra beyond your game day 8. If you carry 10, you can have 4, but I think the odds of them having a pure tackle as a 4th guy are low.
It might be pretty slim, yeah. But a good swing tackle, someone who can play, guard in a pinch or tackle would be a nice little addition here, especially if we can get one in the 4th, 5th round or so.
Yeah. All right, now the interior offensive line is a mess. What's your plan for that?
Yeah, I think the name that all Ravens fans have been throwing around, Daniel Falele. I mean, I think at the end of the day, he's a victim of almost like the social media aspect of things where I think, was it Emmanuel Acho that called Justin Herbert a social media quarterback? I don't know if I'd go that far for Daniel Falele, but I think his lowlights are the stuff you get, capped on social media and get 10 million views for, oh, look at this guy who missed his block. But, that doesn't show the other 30 reps where he has a pretty good rep, all things considered, right? With all that said, I think he is a guy that I would be a little hesitant to re-sign unless we got him for a really team-friendly deal.
Right.
And to be quite frank, I think with the amount of flack he's caught from the fans, maybe a fresh start would be a good thing for him.
Yeah, I completely agree on the fresh start. It would be the good thing for him. I would consider it fairly a significant display of mental toughness if he would stay with the Ravens on a 1-year deal. It probably wouldn't be, it's hard to really say because the Ravens are clearly going to want him as a backup. I would have said no way in hell was Ben Cleveland going to be back this last year, but then all of a sudden he signs for the vet minimum, and you're shocked at the thing. I guess he did have some baggage. Falele has the social media baggage, and whoever signs him could take a lot of heat if they're depending on him to be their starting guard. And yet I think there's a lot of people enamored with his physical makeup that say we can fix whatever the Ravens couldn't about him, which is really processing speed related. So he's got some foot speed issues. I think you can actually work with them. It's really the processing speed that is the annoying thing that just really does not seem to have improved tremendously.
Do you see him developing into kind of a good upper echelon starting guard at any point in his career, or at this point do you think he is what he is?
Okay, longer question. I don't know if I really want to get into it now, but I'll give you my 2 or 3 sentences on this. Is that I think there's a possibility Daniel Falele could be better than he is right now. Upper echelon, probably not. He's been in the league 4 years. 2 of those were kind of wasted developmentally at tackle, so his guard progression has been a little slower. But I still see this processing speed being such an issue. It's either a pretty serious coaching issue to not do that, which I have trouble believing a long tenured coach like Warhop is not trying to make the best he can out of Falele. And it shouldn't be him about, his primary job is just reducing Falele's penalties when he's got this other really serious deficit in his game. Given that, I question the ability to do that. Daniel needs to be committed to that. He needs to go to whatever training he can get that's position specific this offseason and try and get better at that element of the game.
For sure. That makes a lot of sense. I think moving on maybe to the left guard position then. Andrew Voorhees, I think he does have a little more leeway as far as the team option is concerned. Mm-hmm. I'm fine slotting him in right now at the left guard with Emory Jones potentially trying to challenge him as well. But I think ultimately there's going to need to be a fresh face in the room. I'm hoping an early to mid-round pick, second, third round, versus maybe getting someone in free agency if that's something we can afford.
Could be both. And I think we could see a fairly high pick going to offensive line. I'd be shocked if they didn't actually double dip on the offensive line anyway. So they'll get an interior guy. It could be Jones as their swing guy. It could be somebody else as their swing guy. But they have to have I think they'll have to have 2 new draft picks and maybe 1 more veteran just to round out the room at this point. They've got, they're short on total bodies in that group.
Yeah, I think just having a few folks that can rotate in and out is going to be extremely helpful for this team. But I'm excited to see what they do. I think this is the one position where I'm not sure how they handle this, but I think this is one that's going to be very set the tone for the rest of the offseason.
Okay, so biggest question is Tyler Linderbaum. How are you addressing that?
I want to keep him around. I know you can't necessarily make decisions based on what's happened in the past in these cases, but I remember watching Gino Gradkowski in 2013 torpedo the line single-handedly.
Mm-hmm.
I think Linderbaum has showed me enough, especially post-bye, where he seemed like he was healing from whatever nagging injury that was ailing him. He showed me enough that I think he can and should be top-tier center in this league. And I'm not sure if it deserves a Creed Humphrey deal at 18 a year, but Cam Jurgens deal at 17, maybe 16. If he'll take it, I'd love that. But I do think one of our top priorities as far as re-signing our own free agents has to be keeping him in Baltimore.
All right. So my fear is there's a lot of teams who want him, that the number is going to be something like $20.5 million per year. And then what do you do if you're the Ravens? You overpay by let's call that a $3 million overpay for him relative to the Humphrey contract. And I mean, he's a lot less of a player than Creed Humphrey is. That's my main problem with this. So I don't have a problem with Kansas City got a really cheap deal on Humphrey. I don't have a problem if the center market exploded across the board and we saw a bunch of centers were making $20 million a year. Then I guess I have to kind of grit my teeth and bear it in terms of signing Linderbaum at that kind of level. But I'm really a guy who's 18th of 32 pass blockers by PFF, who I see, have to watch his pass blocking snaps every week and see that being really the weakness of his game. It's frustrating. And it's probably every bit as frustrating as Faalele in this sense that it's a weakness I really question will it ever be able to overcome due to length in particular being an issue. There's just too many big defensive tackles with telephone pole arms that can stick their hand right in his chest plate without him being able to do much about it. And we see him get overwhelmed a lot. Faalele, just the processing issue for him is the other thing that I don't think I question whether it can ever be fixed. Right. So he did pass block better after the bye this year, by the way. That is an important thing. That's why I'm willing to go as high now as about the Humphrey contract, because that doesn't include the increments to the caps that have occurred since.
Yeah, it's going to be a tricky one of him because I think the points here are well taken that he is a smaller body. He has struggled with pass blocking, and especially against bigger defensive tackles. And Keanu Benton in Pittsburgh is someone I think he has struggled with in the past.
This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. The new year doesn't have to mean a whole new you. Sometimes it's just about feeling a little less burdened. And one thing, for instance, I'm working on is letting go of that constant pressure to have everything figured out. Like I need to be perfect or I am behind if I'm not. Therapy can help you identify what's weighing you down or holding you back by giving you an unbiased perspective so you can better understand your relationships, your motivations, and your emotions. And BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with a qualified therapist. Their therapists are fully licensed in the U.S. and work according to a strict code of conduct. They also do initial matching work for you so you can focus on your goals. You'll fill out a short questionnaire. With their experience and strong matching process, they typically get it right the first time. And if you're not happy with your match, you can switch to a different therapist at any time from tailored recommendations. BetterHelp makes it easy to get matched online with qualified therapists. Sign up and get 10% at BetterHelp.com. That's BetterHelp.com.
Hi, folks. The Super Bowl is here, and MyBookie is where you can turn your bets into bankroll. Are you scheduled to go to the Super Bowl party and you don't want to be there? Yeah, I've been to that party too. Managing your portfolio of wagers through the evening can be your ticket through Super Sunday without getting caught up in your brother-in-law's political rhetoric. Whatever your take on the game, MyBookie has both side and prop bets to make your Super Sunday a lot of fun. That's why I use MyBookie. You've probably heard them talked about on Jimmy Kimmel Live for their deep board of prop bets. These bets become some long-lasting memories, including watching Refrigerator Perry score in Super Bowl 20 at 100-1 odds. If there's ever a time to get in, it's right now. One account, one wallet, bet the spread, live bet the second half, hit the casino during commercials. It all lives in one place. Go to mybookie.ag now. Use promo code Ravens and get your first bet covered up to $500. If it doesn't hit, use your bet back bonus token and run it back. Don't just watch the big game, make it pay on MyBookie.
Let me tell you about the online cannabis company that's changing the game, Mood.com. They created an entirely line of functional gummies, 100% federally legal THC blends, discreetly delivered right to your doorstep. And here's the best part. You can get 20% off your first order at Mood.com with the promo code RAVENS. Now, I've tried a bunch of their gummies myself. Each one's totally unique. The Sleepy Time gummies knock me out right away. They help me unwind fast, leave me refreshed the next morning. The Epic Euphoria gummies, they're perfect for when your day just isn't going the way you want it to go. What makes Mood special is how they pair the THC with natural herbs and adaptogens. You won't find blends like this at any local shop. They've got gummies designed for focus, relaxation, clarity, even energy, all made from cannabis grown on small, family-owned American farms. No pesticides, no shortcuts, just high-quality weed you can trust. Plus, Mood backs everything with a 100-day satisfaction guarantee. So head on over to Mood.com, check out their amazing selection, and don't forget to use the promo code RAVENS at checkout to save 20% off your first order.
Every day, companies you've never heard of are making millions off your personal data. Your name, address, phone number, even details about your family are pulled from public records on the internet, then sold without your consent. There's an entire marketplace built on your privacy, and most people have no idea it exists. Aura fights back. Aura removes your personal data from broker sites and keeps it off. Aura also alerts you fast if your information shows up in a breach or on the dark web. But Aura is more than just a data broker removal system. It's a full digital security suite that protects every part of your online life. Aura gives you a VPN to stay private, antivirus to block threats, a password manager for safer logins, and spam call protection to shut down scammers. Aura scans the dark web for your most sensitive information and notifies you instantly if anything is exposed. And if your identity is ever stolen, you're backed by up to $5 billion in insurance and 24/7 US-based fraud support. Other service charges about the same, but only cover one or two areas. Aura gives you everything: data broker removal, identity and credit monitoring, device protection, and fraud support, all in one simple app. Aura removes what's already exposed, protects what's not, and puts you back in control. Go to aura.com/remove for complete digital protection and peace of mind. That's aura.com/remove.
But at the same time, or Cam Hayward, Cam Hayward, absolutely too. But at the same time, he is, I think, an integral part of this line. And I don't know, 20.5 is very rich. But I think if it comes out to a $1 or $2 million overpay, I can take my medicine and swallow it. I think it's gonna be fine. But
okay,
it's gonna be tricky. I do want to keep him in Baltimore long term, but the money is going to be very, very difficult here.
Okay. All right. So just to recover that, Voorhees you have as an incumbent but potential competition element. Falele gone, a new face, a vet, and Emory Jones that all might compete for spots on either side. I guess Emory Jones, by the way, I think more of a right guard than a left guard based on length. So that might be
he played on the right side at LSU, right? Like, if I remember correctly.
Both this season. He played on right guard when Falele was hurt. He played at left guard when Voorhees was hurt. In fact, he did both in the same game once.
Okay. I think he's going to be a guy that we'll see where he slots out better. But, I have a high hope for him. He was a third-round pick. He didn't play much this year, obviously. But I think he will be a guy that I'm hoping to get a heavy snap rotation out of this year. If he takes over Falele's starting job, that's fantastic. But I guess we'll kind of have to wait and see how it unfolds in camp at the end of the day.
Right. It was sad that he lost the developmental year. Let's flip it over to the defense. You have a note about George Warhop here. Are you moving on?
If I could, yeah. I really appreciate what Coach Warhop's done for us, especially after Jody's very untimely and just very sad passing, obviously. But I think with a fresh group of faces here, ostensibly fresh offensive coordinator, potentially replacing the O-line coach and having everyone on the same page would be a good idea as well.
Yeah, it's also an opportunity to get a younger guy who will be a dynasty coach that might be around for 12 or 15 years. And there aren't a lot of position coaches you can easily do that with. I know that people complain all the freaking time about the X's and O's guys. They want their head coach to be an OC or DC also. Well, the offensive line coach is a position coach that often never advances in his career beyond that point. They're specialists in a way. It's kind of like being a kicking coach. It'd be great to pick the next great young guy who's 40 years old now and already has a track record, because there's plenty of those in the college level at least, that you can ride for 15 to 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm excited to see where the coaching staff finds this guy, but I agree. I think there is a lot of opportunity to really mold a guy. Yeah, like you said, a dynasty coach, a guy that can be here for the long haul and really be the guy that develops with Minter, develops with his OC, and becomes hopefully the next stalwart for the offensive line for us.
All right, let's flip it over to the defense. The edge position, obviously in transition now. Kyle Van Noy posting some interesting videos. What are you hoping to get them there?
Yeah, I think this is going to be the biggest part of the defense to rebuild. And I think having a good edge rusher, and if we can get a premier edge rusher, great. If not, maybe two guys that can hopefully combine to give us some consistent four-man fronts, four-man pressures. I think that's going to open up the rest of the defense, to be quite frank. But I think Draymond Jones is where I'd start. I think he gave us some great snaps and really, more importantly, gave us that swagger. The swagger on this defensive line that's been missing for a couple of years at this point. So I'd love to keep him around Baltimore if we could.
Okay. All right. What's your number, your AAV number on him?
OTC had him about $15 million a year, which put him some like 25th or so for edge rushers. He's kind of a interesting case because he play both inside and outside. I think I'd be comfortable giving that money to him. I think he's shown me so far that he has a burst still, and he's been a pretty good leader for these guys since he came over from Tennessee.
All right, I would say, just out of hand, I see the OTC valuation is at $15.3 million, which is remarkable. He just had his age 28 season. I would say that's too high.
Too high.
Specifically too high, yeah. So the Ravens have had all the success going to the veteran edge market and finding guys in the bargain bin who still have something left. I would definitely have one of those on the team. And it had much less success drafting the guys, not none. Bowser, Judon, they were good draft picks. Where they were taken. Judon in particular was a 5. Bowser was a 2, but he had coverage skills that are unusual. I don't think the Ravens are going to spend $15 million at that position as well in 26. I think the draft pick, a high round draft pick, is the more likely avenue. Hopefully more development from Mike Green, a veteran. And then you have Tavius Robinson as their early down snaps guy who can also kick inside. I'm not saying Draymond Jones wouldn't be useful. I just wouldn't pay that for him. If it were $9 million a year, okay, sure. $9 million AAV, I'm excited again about it. But at 15, I think it would be an overpay.
That's fair. I do think, and you just kind of touched on this, would be having an early round draft pick. I think is going to be really important for this position. We have the luxury of picking 14th, which is the highest we picked in a little while. Last time we got here, we had Kyle Hamilton out of it, which was amazing.
Yep.
But, I mean, just in the first round alone, it looks like there's a couple of potential game-changing edge rushers that we can potentially grab with the 14th pick, or, even with a slight trade down or a slight trade up if there's someone like Ruben Bain that falls.
Right.
And, Ken, I'm sure you'll touch on this in a different podcast later on, but I think there's a lot of exciting options here, and I think this has got to be one of our top priorities going forward.
So just an aside here, a lot of exciting options when you enter the draft is good. You want to have edge rusher and you want to have 4 or 5 position groups that you're agnostic to selecting in that first round. If you do, that puts you in a position of strength where you may have multiple players. And then I also want to encourage people to just, if the Ravens draft someone who does not fill a positional need, that usually means it's an outstanding value pick. And and you got to look at that. I mean, I think there's a good chance the Ravens will draft a corner in round 1 because it's a very old position group right now for the Ravens. They really need to get younger there. Nobody's talking about it as one of the positions that the Ravens need to draft, but I think it really is. It would surprise me if they drafted another safety. That's what would really surprise me in round 1. But if it wouldn't be Nick Emanwari at 14 because he wouldn't represent a lot of value there. But if there's the next Kyle Hamilton that was available that they really believed in as much, and they didn't draft him, that would also be concerning because you can have you can have two of those on the field. It solves your Marlon Humphrey problem too.
Right. I mean, people say that about Caleb Downs potentially. He could fall to 14. So, I mean, we'll see how it unfolds. But I agree. I mean, best player available has been the philosophy for this team for a very long time, and it's served us extremely well. Yeah.
All right. So we're fairly well set at edge. Now, IDL, another room that is a pretty substantial mess right now. Who are the five guys you would project? Give me five and then one alternate that you would project as being the Ravens guys next year.
So I think everything's going to roll around Travis Jones at the end of the day. I think he's going to be the centerpiece. Converting him to a 3-tech potentially would be something that's going to be extremely useful here if we can make that happen. John Jenkins already extended for another year. I think he's going to be a big part going forward. I have huge hopes for CJ Okoye. I think he was underutilized a bit last year, but I think he has a potential to be a really good interior defensive lineman here. I'm not sure if Josh Tupou really falls into the category yet, but he's someone I think that's worth kind of keeping around in the back burner. And then the Draymond Jones question, I think, is going to be important too if he is someone that's re-signed, because he can kick inside as well. I think that'll be a good
gives
position.
You some relief on defensive line snaps, potentially on third down, but that doesn't really. I'm of the opinion, and I'm sure you've heard it on the pod before, that you never want to go into a game with 4 defensive linemen active.
Right.
So I gotta have you give me 5 names of true interior defensive linemen before I can lower my heart rate a little bit and get into a better position about that.
And I will say this, I know it's really early. It's only January. Draft's not for a couple months, but there are a couple of pretty interesting interior D linemen that are being mocked to us. Peter Woods in Clemson's the guy I keep seeing. If he's the guy the front office really selected as the next guy, I would love that, actually. Mm-hmm. So I think an early round selection for D tackle isn't off the table either.
Yeah, I agree. And you've indicated that you're happy moving Jones to the 3-tech if that's the way it works out. So you're fairly agnostic on a nose tackle or a 3-tech as a year one replacement, say, for one of those two positions.
I think so. I think maybe getting a year one nose as a replacement might work slightly better, just because Travis Jones has been a force in the pass rush game. But
yeah, it's also much cheaper to get the nose. You can get that guy in the 4th round. And Jenkins, he wouldn't prevent anybody from taking his spot this year. I would look at it as kind of a transition, as happened from Pierce to Jones. A couple of years ago, Pierce was the guy who was their pass rush nose tackle for a lot of the year. And then about halfway through the season, they switched to Travis Jones and never looked back.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're still about a player short here, but I'm just going to let that go. I think they're going to have to get it via the draft. And they have had some success with undrafted linemen in the past too. So possibly there as well as a chance.
Potentially. I mean, they brought in 2 guys last year. They brought in Okoye. They brought in the kid from Auburn, Jason Jones. I think it was Jason Jones.
Yep, that's right. And
there's guys
they tried to bring in Hutmaker, and then he skipped town after they made it into a workout. We think what the situation was, he didn't pass his physical when he came to Baltimore.
That was what it was. Yeah, I think so. But I think even someone in the later rounds. I mean, I think nose tackle is going to be a lot easier to find, and then Peebles is still kind of on the back burner. He's definitely a smaller guy, but I was hoping to see more of him this year. I think his pass rush ability would have been something that could have given the team a little bit of juice. So I'm wondering if with a new face of defensive coordinator, with defensive head coach now, maybe we'll see a little more of him.
Okay. All right. Well, certainly one of the things that didn't really play into Peebles' hands this last year is the Ravens weren't as dominant in terms of point differential. And a player like Peebles, you're much happier having him be your 5th defensive lineman if you think you have a chance to blow teams out, because he'll help you close out a game as a pass rusher, as opposed to the multiple nose tackle looks they adapted to using, which were really more of a run defense value. That was, I would look at it as almost like a salvage value on how serious their injury situation was there.
And I'm curious to see how Minter navigates this. I mean, if I remember correctly, he's definitely run smaller fronts quite a bit in LA. So I'm wondering if Peebles will factor more into his plans on that alone.
Yeah, this is a case where it's not his decision to make entirely. Obviously, it is with Peebles, but with the draft picks, if DaCosta drafts him a big nose tackle because he thinks that's appropriate after all that, he's got to play the cards the GM has given within the Ravens construct.
Oh, for sure. And I think Mitch has proven in the last couple of years in LA that he, even when the parts may be subpar in cases, he's found a way to put them together and make them into a cohesive unit. And I'm really excited to see what he can do with it.
Yeah. It'll be a lot of fun. It's like opening Christmas presents to see what your defensive coordinator does differently.
So I feel on draft night every year, Ken.
Make sure you join us for that, folks out there. I want people listening to the draft. We have a wonderful interactive process we do, and I'm going to try and get Ashwin as a panelist this year, but we'll talk about that after the show, and we certainly would appreciate that. Let's move on to the linebacker position then.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything's going to kind of roll around Roquan Smith. I know he had a bit of a down year this year. Was up and down. He had a great game in Cleveland, but then had some off games as well. He carries a decent cap saving of his cut, but I personally think he's going to stay in the Ravens' plans. I think at the end of the day, I think about this quote from Ray Lewis back in 2006, 2007, right before he drafted Lodi Nada. If you have a stout defensive line, and it's going to free up the middle linebackers to really attack. And I think, especially if the Ravens decide to go first round for a D tackle, I think there'd be a lot of room for Roquan to keep working. And I think this year, especially with Madubuike's injury, our interior defensive line plans were thrown out of whack. And I really believe that contributed significantly to Roquan having a down year in his regard. I think at the end of the day, he is a vocal leader on this defense. I think the team values him as such. I think I think Jeff Zierbeck mentioned that during the head coaching search this year, he was present along with Lamar and Kyle Hamilton to help DaCosta and Bisciotti get opinions on these coaches going forward. So that tells me he's a huge part of the Ravens' plans going forward.
I did not hear that. That's interesting. That's very interesting. But you wouldn't do that for a player you weren't planning to keep.
I agree 100%.
I think that decision has been made, by the way. It's about a $7.3 million savings. Another just cap thing that bothers the hell out of me. They have $32.5 million in a cap hit for this. And somebody will say something like, well, $32.5 million is too big a cap hit for a player of his type. Well, they only have $7.3 million that hasn't been spent already on that contract. So the bad thing about this contract, it's a 5-year, $100 million contract. And he's been here 3 years, and they've only paid about a third of it in terms of the cap cost of it so far. So a lot of the remainder is still going to come due. There is a savings for cutting him for his last year. But if they did that, it'd only knock out $20 million. So he'd still make $80 million over 4 years. And all of the rest of that, all the remaining $45 million is going to come due one way or another.
Right. Also, I didn't realize he's only 28 years old. I feel like he's been in the league for 15 years already.
I want to say he was a 20-year-old draft pick with the Bears too. He might have been just 21, but he was definitely on the younger side.
Absolutely, but I would factor him into the longer term, at least for next year. But he plays like a Raven, I think, is the cliched way to say it. But I think he'd be a guy I'd love to keep around.
Okay. All right. Are you happy with who they have with Buchanan or Simpson and as the weak side linebackers?
I think so. The one question I have is really just going to be, how is Buchanan going to recover from this ACL tear? That year 1 to year 2 jump is, there's just so much development that happens that first offseason. And Buchanan now spending a lot of rehabbing is it does concern me quite a bit. With that said, I'll say Trenton Simpson played fairly well in his absence. Especially in the latter half of last year. I was actually really impressed with the way he was flying to the ball, and his instincts seem like they've improved quite a bit. I think between those two, and then I'd be comfortable rolling into next offseason with those guys next to Roquan. And, I'm kind of curious to see what Jay Higgins has to offer too. Guy that's mainly played special teams, played a handful of snaps, especially on the back end of last year. But I think he'll be someone that also I'll be curious to see how he handles a U2 jump. So I wouldn't count him out to potentially start next season, potentially next to Roquan if Buchanan can't go and Simpson isn't really the guy. So we'll see.
That would be a pretty massive change if they did it. I mean, Simpson is entering year 4. he's got a lot of incentives for related to him hitting the open market to really kicking the tires and seeing if he's good. They showed very clearly last year they didn't trust Simpson. And where it showed up most is like going to the dime on these really questionable earlier than normal downs, second and 6, second and 7, second and 8 kind of thing, where you wouldn't normally see it. And it doesn't bode well for their trust in Simpson, the coverage asset.
Right. So, I'd wonder, Buchanan, I think maybe on a PUP candidate, he may be unable to go the first half of the season. So I wonder if they'd give Higgins a look, just because, like you mentioned,
it's possible.
Yeah, I'm not sure if they trust Simpson as much as I was hoping they would.
Yeah.
But
all right. So position still in flux. Are you bringing back Jake Hummel? You said isn't worth re-signing. I'm seeing in your notes here.
I don't think so. I think, in my opinion, on these special teams only linebackers, I think the cost of bringing back someone like Hummel, who primarily plays special teams, is very limited on defense, isn't worth the squeeze at this point. I think
is it more of a roster side question than a cost question? Because he'd probably make only the vet min or a little bit more.
I'd say roster side question. I think these are guys that we can probably get 80 to 90% of that production out of and save a roster spot we could use somewhere else, offensive line potentially, or corner.
Yeah. They've got the one roster consideration they need to fit into is that you need to have at least 4 special teams bigs every game. So Hummel is providing them that, and effectively makes him an offensive lineman on their punt team. So they really want to have, they really need to have players who do that. Now they'll have new tight ends and they'll have players that they can put in that position, but they they'll could be losing Kolar from that group as well. So they got to be careful there. Higgins will still be around. Simpson will still be around. So there will be players.
Right. And I wouldn't be mad if they brought him back by any means, but I'm not sure if he's, my top priority here to resign.
Sure. Understood. Cornerback.
And I think you alluded to this earlier, but corner is a sneaky position where I think we have very limited depth. Nate Wiggins is the one guy I can slot in as a starter for next year. But after that, Marlon Humphrey, I'm sure we'll touch on this in a second here, but move to safety, I think would probably be in the cards for him. Chido Awuzie is a free agent. He signed for, it was like $1.6 million last year.
Yeah.
He had a great season. That was an outstanding contract. I'd love to keep him around. I feel like he's not going to re-sign for $1.7 million. But
he had an offset contract, so Tennessee really paid him the bulk of the $8 million that he earned last year. Right. So that was Ravens are genius at finding these players who are on the margin of value, and they have a lot of recruiting pull by the fact that the Ravens have been very good and they have Lamar Jackson, and I think that's still true. I think the Ravens will still go into this offseason as a very attractive team to play for, and most of the players will say, yeah, Lamar Jackson had a down year, he's banged up, but he's going to be back and the Ravens are going to be back. Mm-hmm. I want to play with them.
Right. And I think that goes a long way here, because I do think that a free agent is going to be playing a lot of snaps for the Ravens at corner next year, whether that's Awuzie or that's someone else they'll find on the free agency wire. I think they have quite a few snaps that are available up for grabs right now.
Yeah, and even if you don't see them as available out there, even if they drafted a corner and they started him immediately, corners get injured so often they miss times. There's always it's one space where if the guy's not fifth on your depth chart, he's almost certainly gonna get at least 100 snaps, maybe over the course of a year, just from injuries that naturally occur. TJ Tampa, a little bit frustrating in terms of how far he's developed. What are you expecting from him this year?
I've been a bit lower on TJ Tampa, I think, than many fans have. I agree. His development has been not nearly to the standard that I was hoping for. I think he's someone that we can slot in as like a fourth corner or so, but I'm not really relying on him to be the guy to step into like the CB2 role and play alongside Wiggins on the other side and the outside.
Yeah, if it happens, it'll be because of injuries that he's the second best corner they have left, and that would not be a good situation if it occurred. A guy I'm interested in at the margin of the roster. Coney and Longer will be back, and they'll be competing for spots. The timing of their ACL tears, does it concern you about the start of camp and availability?
I don't think so. Kone was the first offseason game, the first preseason game. And Longer Beam, I think, was in training camp, right? Or
Yeah, it happened really OTAs even maybe because I don't think he really ever played during camp. He wasn't out there.
Yeah,
if he was, it wasn't for much. So
yeah, I'm much less concerned about their recovery than I was Buchanan, for the sole purpose that happened so early in the year that I'm imagining they're already well into their rehab schedules at this point. We're not even in the offseason yet. So I think they should both be ready by OTAs or very close to it. I'm not sure what to expect of either of these guys just because they played so little. But the hope is at least one turns into someone that can play a handful of snaps and 4 and 5 corner formations. So we'll see. But
right. So you need you at least want 5 deep that you can really trust at corner. And the Kone and Longer Beam are both guys who can play on the outside, which the Ravens had typically acquired lots of aircraft carrier types to larger guys that would play on the outside as opposed to the slot. Yeah. Now with Hamilton moving into the slot, any additional slot corners, each additional one has to be thought about very carefully of whether or not he's worth the roster spot. And Keon Martin played well last year. I'd really like to see him kept, but Ardarius Washington, is coming back. He fortunately has the ability to move, play some safety as well. But you can't have, I don't think, 2 pure slot corners behind Hamilton on the roster.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Yeah.
All right, now the big question in the secondary, of course, is Marlon Humphrey. What are you doing there?
I move him to safety. I mean, I think I will say his versatility to still play some level of corner, but also play safety is going to be actually quite useful in a case like this where, I think having a good cover safety would be great. And we saw what Jalen Ramsey did in Pittsburgh mid last year. He single-handedly transformed the defense, it feels like, when he transitioned around week 8 or week 9 last year. Maybe I'm looking at this slightly with rose-tinted glasses as well, but Marlon is a leader on this team. He's a lot of the heart on defense in a lot of ways. He's a guy that I'd love to keep around. And, I think moving him to safety has the potential to be an extremely, extremely high reward move. So I'd love to keep him around. I'd love to have him transition to safety. I think he can still play some corner snaps in a pinch here, but my plans for him in the offseason primarily are going to be revolving around him moving to safety and not as a full-time corner.
Right. And I fully endorse that move. I think, first of all, you want to have that safety depth. And I still think if he moved to safety for the Ravens, the chance of him not playing snaps at cornerback for the entire season is very low. Right. I think, he'd be like Jimmy Smith. They'd be talking about moving him to safety for years, and then he keeps coming in and having to be the number 2 corner year after year after year. In Marlon's case, so you're ruling out cut of Marlon. Do you go to him and ask him for a pay reduction, maybe give it back to him in incentives? Is that a reasonable choice there?
I think so. I mean, I think ultimately that'd be the ideal. I mean, obviously he could just say no to that and test free agency, but I ultimately don't know how hot the market's going to be for Marlon Humphrey, who's coming off somewhat of an up and down season at best. So I think
ranked last among PFF coverage corners.
Right. So I'm not sure how hot his market's going to be to play pure corner. And if he's going to have to transition to safety, I don't see a better place for him to do it than here. Yeah,
I would agree. And it fits so well with what Hamilton does as well. Because if you want Hamilton to blitz the quarterback, I mean, you want a guy who can jump up and take that slot corner responsibility, deny that route, cancel that route. And that's something Humphrey can do in spades. So,
and having Hamilton kind of playing that box role, slot blitzing, the jack of all trades, having Humphrey back there, and then having Starks potentially take the year 2 jump as well. That's a formidable trio at safety. I mean, I think that could strike fear in the heart of opposing defensive coordinators.
I would hope so. And the Ravens rely so heavily on multiple safety use. They have to have at least one more pure safety, and then a player like Washington who can play slot corner and free, or Humphrey. Humphrey, I'm already assuming will take Gilman's spot. They need one more guy who can play safety. Keandre Jackson might be that guy because of the special teams contribution, but they've got to turn him into a guy they can trust on the back end because they really need, that's where they need the one extra guy to make sure they don't have to move Hamilton back to the back end during the season and hamstring the defense in terms of usage.
Yeah, I think Keandre Jackson is a guy I was slotting into being that kind of fourth safety here. Could they handle like maybe a late round 6th, 7th round pick? I think this team has had some pretty good luck drafting these and developing these late round safeties. I was really hoping it'd be Bo Braid. But, obviously he's with New York now, and I'm sure he'll stay there with Harbaugh being there.
You a
But
Maryland guy in terms of college, and that's why you like Braid so much, or what was the reason?
Maryland guy, and also he went to River Hill High. I was a River Hill alum, so
Gotcha.
he's local. Yeah.
Right.
But I think having that fourth safety, whether it's Jackson or another late round draft pick, would be a nice way to round out the safety room as well.
All right. All right. I'm with you on that. Very reasonable plan across the board. I hope the dollars can work out in terms of that, and I think a lot of that's based on Lamar. But the other thing you did mention is a extension for Jordan Stout, who hit AP1 at just the appropriate time for his own bank account.
Yeah, I think Jordan Stout had a heck of a year. I think he single-handedly won us that Jets game. To be quite frank, I think he had like 4 punts inside the 10-yard line or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If he, and I'll be honest, I'm not as well versed on the punter contracts and everything, but I'd love to keep him around Baltimore. I think he had a great year this year, but I think it's going to be right player, right price, and the All Pro, I'm sure, drives his market rate up a little bit more.
Right. I agree. I think aside from the punting, which is very good, he's generally thought to be one of the better holders in the league, and that was kind of hidden from us for 3 years as Tucker was declining, and you have to wonder then, is this Tucker or is this Stout? And they were saying the whole time, to their credit, they were saying the whole time, nothing about the hold. This is Tucker pulling kicks left. This is his problem. And Tucker was saying the same thing. So it wasn't like anybody else was. But now it's, Tyler Loop has a big first year, setting aside that last kick, had a really good first year. And a lot of that is on Jordan Stout being a good holder.
Right. And, speaking of Tyler Loop, I'm still pretty optimistic he's going to continue to develop into a very good kicker. I'm sure that last kick definitely shook his confidence, but, I'm hoping that this is something he'll shake off. He'll continue to work on the offseason, and he'll be the guy going forward.
Yeah, I mean, he had an outstanding season. Aside from it, Randy Brown is a very good kicking coach. I'm very concerned that they keep him and he doesn't travel with Harbaugh. Them being in New Jersey it's just a bad thing. I mean, I wish Harbaugh had done, gone anywhere else. And now I understand more from all of the potential defections why Bisciotti was kind of encouraging him to take a year off from football. Because one of the things that would have happened if you take a year off from football, you pay him, $40 million or whatever, or $20 million maybe if in terms of the year missed, and then there'd be offsets after that. But you also really restrict his ability to reach into your organization and take a bunch of people with him. And obviously some of that's occurred.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, him being just up by 95 definitely makes things a little very easy for him to poach a lot of the folks.
Yeah, Randy Brown is the point I was making is he's been mayor of some town in New Jersey. He's from Jersey, so that's really a problem. Yeah, so
I didn't know that. I mean, yeah, I guess if you're the mayor of the town, it's a very attractive reason to go back home, right?
Yeah. I don't think he is anymore, but he was, and so he's I don't know whether he's Central Jersey, South Jersey, North Jersey, where exactly his town is, but I know he was making the commute for a long time, and I know it was a big pain in the ass. And the Ravens finally, paid him appropriately to kind of move up here, have an apartment here during the season at least.
That's a heck of a commute, Jersey to Baltimore every day. Wow. Okay.
Well, he wasn't doing it every day. That's not that kind of a commute. But you might make it once a week, or you might only work 3 days, and you have a half day commuting and then a half day commuting on both ends.
Yeah, fair enough.
All right, Ashwin, outstanding stuff. Really appreciate you putting together this really detailed like this. You also have a presentation style that's extremely quick, which I appreciate too for this kind of material. Normally, folks, I'd say I don't usually like to have people take as much as Ashwin did, but I want to hear from you as well in terms of shorts. Talk to me about something you're passionate about, and have it be something real specific that we can talk about in about 20 minutes. We're looking for shorter content in these short episodes. But Ashwin, tell folks, I met you on Reddit, community out there. I want to give props to, because I think very high level discussion is occurring out there on Reddit now that has emerged from among the Buck Allen memes that I know the site for a few years ago.
Yeah, no, shout out to the Reddit community. I think it's been very interesting to kind of talk very high level football with the folks out there. So, I mean, it's been a great community. I've learned quite a bit just about the X's and O's and also about salary cap management. A lot of very knowledgeable people out there.
Okay. All right. Tell folks where they can contact you if they have a question they want to ask you about this or about talk football in general.
Yeah, you can hit me up on Reddit. I'm going to change my username at some point. It's Hot Takes My Toxic Trait, which is ridiculous. I need to get a better username. I'd say DM me on Instagram. The handle is Are You Ready? AREYOUREDDI, like ready, like the whipped cream.
Okay. All right. Those are both difficult handles to deal with. But anyway, I understand it, Ashwin. We appreciate having you on. Other folks out there, please make use of hashtag Film Study Mailbag for questions. I'll try and direct them to the appropriate show, answer them with a 1 to 3 minute video, etc. Ashwin, thanks again for coming on.
Hey, thank you so much, Ken. I appreciate the time.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.
Take care.